Balancing through loss and grief. Today I have with me some of the top doctors who have worked with people throughout their lives on working on death, grief, and children who have suffered through cancer, and how they brought this body of work throughout over 55 countries to create centers and support groups that help people become from dealing with loss to becoming more full functional in their life. And I want to really thank you folks for being here today. We have Dr. Jerry Jampolsky.
Thank you.
And his beautiful wife, Diane Cirincione.
Dr. Diane Cirincione.
I almost got that right.
It's not
easy. You know, I really wanted to have you folks in. You're here sometimes in Hawaii a lot, and then you're back in California. But you do work all over the world and helping people with the topics, one of your topics, death and loss and grief. And you know, I wanted to have you here to talk about how can I, as a person in my daily life, deal with if I have a loss. And loss comes in many forms, you folks had talked about also. So whether it's a divorce, a job loss, or a family member, you know, how do we in our daily lives pull out of that? You know, it can be a very deep, dark, sad time. So,
well, I think we can both share. I'll go first.
Sure.
There's no formula. It would be really nice if there was a formula. There's lots of books written on it, but everyone is so unique, Tina, as you know, and as we've talked about earlier. The idea of loss first, I think, to do anything about it is to be able to recognize that you're feeling it and experiencing it. And a lot of times loss is unrecognized in our culture. Kids who are in school and their parents are getting divorced or their pet dies, there's really no place for it. So some of our programs have gone into schools and kids actually have a place to talk about it. Loss through divorce, loss through loving someone and them loving someone else. So I think that the themes seem very different, but the core issue is the feeling of something that I really love and cherish has gone from me, or whether it's abandonment, a loss is seen in a lot of different ways. So I think the first thing is to recognize it. The second thing is to find a healthy environment to be able to deal with it. The support groups, the Attitudinal Healing support groups, are places where people come together, sort of heal themselves to really for their own healing, and in the process of creating an unconditionally loving environment for others, they are receiving it also themselves. You want to take it from there, Jerry?
Yes, we think it's really important not to have a prescription for how someone else should die. And I think the most important thing we can do as a family member or a friend is to be there giving our love and our peace to that person and not be fearful, not demonstrate fear, but peace and love. At our Attitudinal Healing Center, we do our best to create an atmosphere of unconditional love and giving. And when you're in a consciousness of giving to another person, your heart opens up and you begin to feel peaceful again.
So you folks create like a safe place where a person's allowed to express without judgment what their feelings of the loss or the person that could be going through a health concern or something. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, it was the first model of that, starting in 1975, when you remember we didn't even have the word support group in our vernacular, and children with life-threatening illnesses, at that time over 90% of kids died of leukemia and childhood cancers. And so it was bringing the kids together to say maybe there's some way. Jerry thought that he was afraid of dying himself. And so maybe the kid that's in remission has something to teach one who's just going into it. We don't know. Let's come together. It literally was the first support group of its kind, and then for siblings and parents. And a lot of hospitals have those programs now and have adapted it. But we also use some really generic principles. And the reason it's been accepted in so many countries is that it's free, and that these principles really support, regardless of your faith or your culture. They don't interfere with it. But principles like we look at health differently and healing differently than a lot of people, even though we're in the medical model. We look at true health as inner peace, and healing as the letting go of fear, and loss is very much based on fear. And all the fears look different, all the losses look different, but they're all based in the same fear, which is the fear of separation. separation from something is loss. And so when we're feeling the loss, something that's really helpful for me is to ask myself, what is it I'm afraid of being separated from right now?
So
or
you
that
help
I am
people
being separated
integrate
from.
that fear.
Integrate, recognize it first, and look at the level of attachment to it. Look at what you can do, St. Francis's prayer, the wisdom to know the difference of what you can or can't. And a lot of us were victims of so many things in our childhood, whether it's domestic violence or other kinds of abuse, abandonment. Even though we were victims at that time, attitudinal healing works with us very much in the present to say, at this moment, I'm not experiencing that, but it's my thoughts and attitudes about that are causing me the pain. And dealing with it in the present situation can be incredibly healing, because what it does is it brings to mind that we actually have more choices than we've given ourselves, and it's dealing with gaining control back over those choices.
So it actually helps you to bring yourself back to be able to focus and move forward. And Jerry, you had mentioned that a lot of times we are wanting to be the victim, but you folks' process actually helps people to be the victor. Why do we want to switch and not focus so much on claiming that we're a victim, but to
Because there are two voices that we listen to. One is the voice of fear, which is really the voice of the ego, and the other is the voice of love. And when we start retraining our mind to listen to the voice of love, what happens is our heart opens up with peace and joy and happiness, and we change our belief system. Most of us are born in this world believing that sooner or later you're going to die, and that's the end of life. That's not one of our belief systems. Our first principle is the essence of our being is love. That means we're more than just these bodies. We're an energy of love, of unconditional love, no matter what. So one of the core principles of attitudinal healing is forgiveness. Being able to forgive our bodies, forgive our feelings of separation. There are many people who learn that they can really talk to people who have passed away. When they're praying or meditating, they can feel there's a communication or the presence is there. Many people, when they're dying, oftentimes what is interfering when they're using the pain medications or chemotherapy is their unforgiving thoughts about others or themselves. So we open that door to them, not pushing or pulling them through that door, but the whole aspect of everyone being there, they're there for their own healing. They're there to heal their own mind. They're there to find peace of mind as their only goal, and learning that you can find peace no matter what is on your plate, no matter what is on your plate.
So how would you help someone deal with such negative, because if you've had someone pass away, and especially when it's like a suicidal or something, society doesn't really allow you to express a dialogue that, I'm having this grief, I don't know how to integrate that. How would you help? What's some practical action steps to help them balance? Because that's what I'm hearing, that you're saying that peace is really what you're doing, is balancing out the emotions so you can be present and focused.
Well, your question implies that I'm going to give some advice, and that I'm not going to do, because that's not what we do.
Okay.
We open the door to the fact that the biggest gift that we have is choosing what thoughts, what attitudes we put in our own mind. And most people don't recognize that. And when they realize that, I may not be able to control my brother committing suicide, or I may not be able to control someone dying, but I can control how I respond to that by the thoughts I choose. So we suggest that one of the things we can choose to do is to have peace of mind as our only goal, to not be a victim, to have forgiveness as our only function, and do our best to demonstrate unconditional love wherever we go, to be able to see a light in a person rather than their lampshade.
I might add on here, Jerry, though, that when we're talking about forgiveness, we're talking about absolutely not, it doesn't mean agreeing with somebody else, supporting what they did, and it certainly doesn't mean allowing someone to do it again. Unconditional love and forgiveness is not supporting another person's insane behavior. That's pathology. So when we deal with domestic violence and so much, it's such a complex issue. And
society's not very good about wanting to talk about it.
Well, I think until the late 90s with the O.J. Simpson case, they didn't even have a name to it. And the horrible thing about that is that it happened. The good thing about it is that everybody talked about it after that. And in my doctoral work, that's what I was focusing on, because I grew up in that environment, trying to understand it. And how come you didn't leave? Or when you left, what happened? You know? So I think forgiveness is a really important part of it, Tina, because everything in attitudinal healing is what goes on inside of you. And then you come to that place and say, what do I need to think and say and do about it? It could be restriction order, divorce, it could be leaving, it could be any of those. But what you do is you first find the place inside where you can make a choice that's loving for you. There's no room for denial in any of this work, because you look straight at it. This is what's happening to me. And then take responsibility for the ability to be able to heal inside. So again, it's absolutely not supporting another person's insane behavior or allowing it to happen again. And in order to do that, we have to really look at the role of that we have as the victim.
So taking responsibility of your own life, thoughts, and actions.
Exactly, exactly. And so, I mean, the reality is that things happen to us that are horrific, and we are victims of it, and we're usually helpless at the time that it happens. So given that, the question is, and we want to honor it, we want to acknowledge it, we want to respect the fact that this is a woundedness. What we have the choice over is not whether it happened or not, because it happened. What we have a choice over is how we look at it now, and how long do we want to remain a victim. It's like, what altar do you want to worship at? You know, how long will it take to forgive? It'll take as long as someone thinks it'll take. If you think it'll take a long time, it's going to be a long time. If you think it'll happen soon, it'll happen soon. If you think it can happen in an instant, it can happen in an instant.
How can this help people with their stress and with their well-being, following some of your folks' principles?
Well, people in stress tend to worry a lot. They tend to make judgments about themselves. They think that worry is going to solve their problem, when really worry, the act of worrying, is a decision to suffer and to go in a circle. Again, when we talk about having a choice of two emotions, whether we're going to be interpreting people's behavior to decide who's guilty and who's not, or to do our best to say, Tina, your light is all that I see, and is but a reflection of the light in me. And when we start to change our voice, our stories, when we totally forgive the past, which means the past disappears, forgiveness means letting go of all hopes for a better past. Many people are still struggling that with their parents and other places. 50% of people haven't totally forgiven their parents.
So you actually can have chronic cycling of families who are dealing with loss and grief.
Absolutely, because these people tend to repeat their stories to other people. I've had so many hurts.
Can you relearn and be an example? And because a lot of times kids will start to pick up or feel that this...
We have groups for kids. Because they do, they'll pick up the same thing that they from their parents or from those experiences. You absolutely can. That's the power of it. People are like amazed that, oh my God, it can't be that easy. That if I actually change my mind and my thinking, my life will change, and actually it will. And you know, we have decades, 40 years, and 35 years for me, 40 years for Jerry, of this work in so many cultures saying, yes, it actually does. But you can't use denial. You have to look at it and then honestly say, I have a choice. You know, I have a choice in this. You didn't have a choice back then, but you really have a choice now.
And we have to start asking the question, do I really want to count all my hurts every day and hold grudges? Does that really bring you peace of mind? And when you really commit yourself to doing that, you're going to say, no, it doesn't bring me peace of mind. And if you really want peace of mind, it's another carrot then for you to let go of the past and start living in the present and realize our real purpose for being here is to help each other, to come together, to join, to feel one, to be kindness and compassionate to each other. And it's our unforgiving thoughts and our grievances that we tend to hold on to because we listen to that wrong voice, the voice of fear, that things begin to change. Actually, miracles begin to happen in terms of loving someone that we thought we'd never be able to love because they did such awful things to us all of our lives.
Well, why is it the current model? Because I think you folks are sort of off on the side creating a new model. You know, it's a psycho-spiritual, physical model. But why is it our common model, I guess is what I should say, is one that allows you to continue to be in that story, to talk about that story.
The current model is based on fear. And the law of fear is that if something happens to me, I'm going to find someone else to blame, or I'll start blaming myself.
Or yesterday was horrific, yesterday was awful, today's horrific, and tomorrow's going to be worse.
So it's all
about belief system.
It's all about belief system. And so when we really see value in forgiveness and letting go of the past and realize that forgiveness is really the key to happiness, we begin to retrain our mind in a very positive way, and we begin to find joining, and we really believe that we can find peace no matter what's put on our plate today. That's a belief system that really works when one commits oneself to learning that way.
I think we can also say that it's actually not a new model. I mean, this model is 40 years old, but it's really based on ancient universal principles. And the idea that it's possible to change your belief system. I mean, everything we have, everything is based on our attitude, whether it's faith or work or friendships or whatever. It all works because of the attitude, or doesn't work because of it. And so attitudinal healing it's more than an idea, I think, who's come now, because the original work that Jerry did was the belief that the mind and the body were connected, and in the West that was unheard of. And now we have all science in the last 10, 15 years to show us that that's true. And we have bazillion examples of that's truth. And so my mind affects my body. The body weeps the tears the eyes never shed.
So dis-ease is exactly that. It's
literally, yes, yes. And so if we can't process it, it's going to come out in our body. Or it's going to come out in our creating situations where we continue to suffer. And here's the big question is this. And I ask our viewers that, do you really believe at a core level that you deserve the right to be happy? And
well, you do have basic rights, and we forget that.
Yeah.
And then we forget the power of voicing our rights. We've sort of have set ourselves back to be, just there.
More passive.
And passive.
But see, what you're doing, you're bringing these issues into people's living rooms because they're living with them, and you have the courage to talk about them. So we really admire that.
So is it true that a lot of times society will express what families are suppressing? Do you folks see that?
You mean in the violence? I think so.
Because when you don't talk about it.
Right. Oh, there are people sort of talking about it more now. I don't think it's as hidden as it used to be. It's just, are the resources available to those who really need it to identify it in their lives and to be able to.
And is there really ever a right time to talk about it? No, there's not. But it's when, and I think that's one of the problems, is because we want it to be in that safe place and in that safe room, but it restricts, and it doesn't allow people to open up and have dialogues where they can say, okay, I am responsible for what I'm thinking past. Yes, this did happen. I'm not denying it. But now I can take responsibility if I choose to keep on letting that bring me down, or if I'm going to move forward. And
there's an obstacle, and that is we live in a culture also that it's a sign of weakness if you're asking for help rather than a sign of strength.
Or showing that you need help, your vulnerability.
And I wanted to mention before we forget about it that there is a Center for Attitudinal Healing here in Hawaii. There's a group in
services are free
in Kauai and on the Big Island. And I think you have the phone number, Diane, of the center.
The 808.
Yes.
Do I have it? Who's got it?
808. I've got it with my glasses, right? 808. 381-0408.
And all services are free there.
It'll put you in touch with someone with the center here. Yeah.
So grasping your imperfections just as much,
Right.
I think that's what's really important, is that we're allowed to be as frail. Not, sometimes we only want to show that strong side.
And we have the shadow side.
And we have all
sides.
sides.
Personalities. That's true. And I guess the part that we always emphasize too, though, is that we're so much more than this. We're more than our story, but most of us think we're our story. We're so much more than that. And when we talk about responsibility before, Tina, you mentioned that by taking responsibility, we allocate no blame or shame or righteousness to responsibility. It's just, it's the freedom to take responsibility. Because in taking responsibility, unlike what the ego says, that'll be a burden. No, responsibility is freedom, because then you can make a choice.
We have no idea, most of us, about how much we condemn ourselves throughout the day based on things that have happened in the past, or how much we are judging other people.
Or ourselves, yeah.
And when we learn to see the value in not playing the game of blame and guilt, but seeing everyone as a light beam rather than a costume that people wear when they're doing terrible things.
Well, we only want to show our best, but we don't want to show the side that...
Or, and even when we look at other people, I love the cartoon and Love is Letting Go of Fear. There's a person with a lampshade, and it says, I choose to see somebody's light instead of their lampshade. And the lampshade is like the personality that we wear around that's developed since we were a kid. But we really believe we're more than that.
A couple of books that might be of interest to your listeners is Love is Letting Go of Fear.
I think Goodbye to Guilt's a really huge one.
And,
Goodbye to Guilt.
The Mini Course for Healing Relationships.
I mean, Mini Course for Life. Yeah,
for life. For life.
Right. Yeah, there's
and the Forgiveness book, Forgiveness, the Greatest Healer of All.
Yeah.
These are very practical books that are easy to read and are reader-friendly.
I like the title of your one book. I think it's the Oh Shit Matters.
No, not quite. It's called the Oh Shit Factor, Waste Management for Our Minds, and wrote that primarily for young people in their teenage or young adulthood. And we find that many people who may be on a spiritual pathway, but their kids certainly are not,
Yeah.
that this book they can relate to because it speaks a language that they can understand. And Diane's mother was very upset for me starting to write this book. And then a couple of months later, after I was writing it, she said, "You know, I have to tell you the truth." She's 92 now. You know, I say that word shit quite a bit.
Well, I think, you know, we've all given each other a lot of shit, and I think it's time to decide, stop giving each other shit, and let's
stop putting it in our head. And we put poison in our head when we're holding on to unhealed relationships. We're putting on to judgments and hate and anger, and all this can be replaced with love through forgiveness.
Well, I think it's very interesting work, and I really appreciate that you folks took the time. Can we talk a little bit about loss in a different way? You know, a lot of people are having to transition, losing their home, you know, in foreclosure, losing their job. So transition for what they were used to, you know, having to maybe downsize and really live differently. So how do you help people understand and integrate when they have a loss, whether it's, and even, you know, some people are experiencing loss of being away from their pets because their house gets foreclosed, they don't have all the things they used to.
Well, let me give you a quick example. Back in 87, there was this tremendous earthquake in San Francisco, and many people lost their homes. Some people remained a victim of that and angry for what happened, and angry at the world, and angry at God the rest of their lives. There's another person that we know, a couple family, that moved to Oakland. And then there was a fire, and that's destroyed their house.
The Oakland fire destroyed the second house.
And they continued to accept it and move on rather than being a victim because they forgave the past. They didn't consider themselves a victim.
So, because then it was out of their control.
And they concentrated more
but how they handled it was a choice.
And people who are out of a job right now, those people who also spend time volunteering at different organizations, a soup kitchen, whatever have you, they are the ones that can keep a sense of balance rather than anger and victimhood of why this is happening to me. So a lot of it has to do with really nourishing the soul, our souls that need nourishing, and going out there and helping other people as a way of helping ourselves.
And when we shift the attitude, then miracles start to happen in our lives. It may not be the same thing or what we expected, but it's amazing the turns that our lives take. So the attitudinal healing isn't about healing somebody else's attitude. It's really about healing our own and the way we look at life.
There's another principle that we didn't mention yet, and that is that this is the only time there is. So many of us,
and I want to live.
So many of us live in the future about what awful things might happen, you know. Is there going to tsunami come to Hawaii or what have you? And when we start living in the present and do our best to be loving and forgiving, that is the key to living a successful life a life that's full of love and full of happiness.
Well, and I think it's accepting each other for our frailties and our errors and our, you know, that we have all parts of us. We have all traits, and some days I'm going to be upset, and some days I'm going to have a great day, but I've got this, and if I can just look over at the next person and offer a smile or just be cordial, that I think it makes a big difference.
It goes a long way. And I think, I can't imagine being in a relationship and not using forgiveness. We've been together 32 years and married, and it's like, forgiveness is like major, because you're constantly going against your own expectations, your own script for somebody else, and it's about the releasing of that and just allowing your heart to open with compassion.
But our ego uses a belief system that the past is going to predict the future. And Spirit would use the belief system that the future is now. The past is gone. And this is a time for happiness and for love, because we're not interpreting anything. We're only seeing the light in each other, reminding ourselves we are that light. And we're here to spread that light and help darkness disappear. And we each take that kind of responsibility. The whole aspect of grief, the whole aspect of loss and grief begin to take a whole different picture.
Well, what can we expect from you folks in the future? What's new? What's coming up for you folks?
Well, we only go where we're invited to go, so we've worked in 58 countries, and we just received last week the invitation for Shanghai, China. They want to open a center for attitudinal healing there. People just decide in their community that they would like to do this themselves. And so we sort of follow with Attitudinal Healing International to see how we can support centers who are all doing free work, free of charge. People are volunteers around the world. So I think we'll continue to listen at that and work on our own healing also and our own relationships.
Yeah, I think the best thing to know is that we're all work in process.
Yes.
Yes. Don't give up on
There's
each
no
other.
experts in that. Absolutely.
Exactly.
No one has a big package with all bowls going on.
Correct. And I think if, as a society, if we can recognize and accept that, when we're trying to all be perfect.
And we not take ourselves so seriously, if you will. And when we bring humor into it, like many people are scared of aging. I don't happen to have that fear. And
I think there's a new picture of health right here. You're how old? 80?
I'll be 88 in
Wow.
February. But, you know, I like to think of myself as a walking antique. I like to make fun of it and to make jokes of it. And to realize that my belief system is I don't have to grow up in fear of dying and fear of getting old. And I count my smile wrinkles rather than my aging wrinkles.
Well, I want to thank you both for being here. We've run out of time and went over on the... It was really great. Thank you.
Thank you.